Physiker.
Ja, vielleicht fällt dir ja ein Wunschkandidat ein, mit dem du gerne mal sprechen würdest.
Ah ja, und zwar
Dann laden wir doch den noch ein.
den Ding aus Karlsruhe, den Hans Meyer, der ist von der IAEA Atom, der ist ja Nuklearforensiker.
Na, guck.
Wenn der da irgendwie auf das Thema einsteigen kann, also ich bin mir nicht sicher, weil es interessiert ihn gar nicht. Also
ja,
Energieverbrauch und Information.
Ja, aber macht er einfach mal eine Liste mit
Actually, ich kenne einen aus England, aber den hierher zu fliegen und so weiter, da muss ich fragen, das soll sie aber bezahlen.
Ja, aber wichtig ist erstmal eine Liste, dann haben wir 3, 4 Namen und dann sind das Wunschkandidaten und dann hast du wenigstens auch hinterher eine Diskussion, die was hergibt.
Ja.
Oder dass du da jemanden vorsitzen hast, wo du ein vorgegebenes Thema hast, wo du sagst, okay, Mittel zum Zweck.
Oder das können wir auch dann per Zoom machen, in Englisch. Mit dem Engländer würde ich das gerne machen. Der untersucht das Thema, der will eigentlich, der ist Physiker, wirklich in Sheffield an der Uni, und der will eigentlich ein Projekt machen, um herauszufinden, ob diese Welt eine Simulation ist. I grew up in West Germany at the time, and I was fascinated by the camera my father had. My father was a very, let's say, enthusiastic hobby filmer. At that time it was Super 8. So when I was thinking about it when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I borrowed his camera and started to make my own films. After studying music and studying programming, which I both quit very early, I ended up studying visual communication, which was a way for me to study film. And when I went to the film class, I was in fact more interested in the video equipment than in the film equipment. Because why? Because the film equipment, again, had this chemical smell in the lab, and I've been developing photographs sometimes so long that my nose starting to bleed, especially with the color photography chemicals. I thought that this would be very fossil in a way, so rather I'd progress to electric power and to video. And I was then more interested in video, even though the image quality was so much worse at the time. So I ended up there in the Hochschule für Gestaltung Offenbach am Main, that's near Frankfurt, Germany. That's actually the school where Elfriede Fischinger, the wife of Oskar Fischinger, actually was also studying. And Oskar Fischinger was a German or a worldwide film pioneer in the way that he was the first person to create a synthesized sound by drawing abstract forms like triangles on the Lichttonspur, on the visual audio track of a 16mm film. He by chance discovered that. So in this environment, I went more and more interested and started to work on video. But video by itself was a very tedious project. It was not accurate. You could never cut in frame, single frame accuracy. Why? Because videotapes, they would rewind like then they stop and sync, and then they start running again, and then an electric signal would switch between both tapes. So this was never accurate. And what I loved about film was the accuracy. Like it runs by 25 frames, and you could, by single frames, you could like montage single frames, and you could see it or don't even see it, or you had the control. So at the time, I don't quite remember. This was already then maybe 6 or 7 years after I had made contact with computers in the States, and I did not understand why it should not be possible to combine both technologies like video and computer. So my brother was fed up with a home computer he just had. That was a Texas Instruments TI, Texas Instruments 99, where you stored your software actually on an audio tape cassette, audio cassette, and that is like, probably you don't know that, also like the same information was stored like on a modem or on a fax, like a modulated audio signal, like some information like this, which would be decoded as ones and zeros in the end, and you could load your software with your audio actually into the computer. It had no actual possibility to store a program in permanent memory. So you shut it off your computer, you start it again, and then you load again everything you wanted from external sources. You start the computer, you load the software by audio, and then you can start to program in so-called in basic language. That's called basic because it was supposed to be simple enough for basic people to have basic knowledge to start to learn programming. And there you had complete control over time. There was no control over pixels at the time. There was no control over high resolution. There was only limited control over colors, like 16 colors or something like this. But you could control time, and you could synchronize actually the image with the sound. Like I could make any computer sound from the chip in the computer to go along with any visual pulse. So I figured a way, if I do not take it seriously as an image medium, but an indirect medium, I put the computer screen against the wall, then just by filling it with several primary colors, I could create every color that would be in between in an indirect effect on the wall. So I made an installation that was actually inspired by experimental films that were called Flicker by Tony Conrad, which was an American filmmaker. I thought, okay, you should actually put these films in a new medium. That's always what happens. Like young people always take what's been done before and put them on a new medium. And by doing so, actually discover more things, because, as I said, the computer no more is not magnetic anymore, and it's not chemical anymore. It actually, in the chips, it's electronic. And it can, in very fast computer chips at the time, if they were really fast, it's actually created radiation, actually. So they had to be shielded. Not these home computers, but the computers I was working after. They had all warning labels that were about radiation and Strahlung, sozusagen. So I made this light installation, and from then on I was really hooked on computers, I must say. And I had no more interest to become a musician the old way with a guitar. I thought that to make what's always connected with media is a way how to work or represent the media. Like if you play guitar, you're supposed to stand on stage and behave like a guitar hero, whatever that is. And I thought that would be just not possible that would be just so anachronistic, and also filmmaking would be anachronistic. It was just, if you think like this at a time like that, you are somehow always in a memory of the future operating in the present. So people do not understand what you talk about. There is no money to support work like this. The prizes you can win are never for the media you work, but only for the media that are contemporary. So from early on, I was operating in a niche, that is empty. So in the niche, you can create a lot of things that just do not exist nowhere. It's not a local phenomenon, but at the time it was a global phenomenon because these discoveries, then what you then make, they have not been done before, not in the States, not in China, not in Japan, not in Russia, not in India, not in Africa, nowhere. Antarctica also not. So that was interesting, but on the other hand, you trade in that niche somehow and are a bit lonely and underpaid always, because there's no way to get an art project funded that is so far out of the window. So at that time, I somehow needed still some money. So what are you going to do? I ended up with a friend of mine, Ralf Drexler, who at the time then founded, I believe, what came to be Europe's largest post-production facility. At the time it was small, and he asked me, do you want to be part of this? Das Werk? And I said, no, because I wanted to stay in that niche actually. And he went on to be a post-production facility, and he's never stopped actually to re-innovate himself. He's now operating, I think, Europe's largest LED, you know, these Hollywood LED studios with the LED walls where you have the perfect, you don't need any green screen anymore, you have it directly and you have the perfect lighting and etc. like this. So what I want to say with this is that I went to him and to Bad Homburg. There was a company called Bibo TV, and Bibo TV was at the time, I hope anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Möbius, the French comic artist, was producing a film there, and he invited American programmers to Bad Homburg to write software that didn't exist at the time before. That would be like animation software for Möbius. And Möbius was there, and I was there, and I asked Möbius about the future and why he would be working with computers, and he explained. And Bibo TV was, they created, on the one hand, very mainstream commercial work on video, but on the other hand, they made these avant-garde films, with experimental films, which I don't remember how they had this connection established, but that was actually true. So I was allowed to actually at night work in that studio, because Ralf, my friend, he was working there regularly at his day job as an operator, and he was such a talented operator for all these machines. One that everybody would like to have in his company, because he was a working machine, he was addicted, he was good, he had a good taste, and etc. So we were best friends, and but already then we made actually a label together. We called ourselves Flagrant Frames, and made films of our experiments. So at the time he was already more commercial, or I would say mainstream, but that's not a bad word in this regard. But I would be more in this niche I described. So, but it allowed me to combine all the media in a film called Paradise. That was actually almost my first film, a short film of 8-7 minutes, but I combined everything that I encountered before. That was Super 8 film, 16mm film, computer animation, which I made at Bibo TV, photography, animation of computer renderings, etc., etc., but not meant to be a technological film, but rather an essay on the future called Paradise, like Paradise, like para, above, or like paradise, like paradise.
What are changes of empires?
The wreck of dynasties.
With the opinions which supported them. What is the birth and the extinction of religious and political systems? What are the revolutions of the globe and the operations of the elements of which it is composed.
Compared with life.
What is the universe of stars and suns, of which this inhabited earth is one, and their motions,
And their destiny, compared with life.
life, the great miracle, we admire not, because it is so miraculous. It is well that we are thus shielded by the familiarity of what is at once so certain. If any artist, I do not say had executed, but had merely conceived in his mind the system of the sun and the stars, and had painted to us in words the spectacle now afforded by the nightly code of heaven.
Great would be our admiration. Truly we should have been astonished. And it would not have been a vain boast to have said of such a man, non merita nomini creatore, se non ideo elequenda. But now these things are looked on with little wonder, and to be conscious of them with intense delight is esteemed to be the distinguishing mark of a refined and extraordinary person. The multitude of men care not for them. It is thus with life, that which includes all. That which includes all.
Shortly after, I made a website called Parasite, like parasite, like the thing, the being that is above the site actually, and is actually using its host, an image for humanity somehow, if you wish it to be. So I made this film by a very early addiction. At the time, not knowing why, I always had atomic scenes in my film. Okay, it was the Cold War, and if you do not remember the Cold War, there is a constant threat of nuclear missiles being fired. Something similar like to recent developments in Europe and Russia about Russia, or in the form of Mr. Putin, are very possible to fire a nuclear missile, or the Americans being very aware that China could be firing a nuclear missile, or the Chinese that are very aware that the Americans could fire a nuclear missile. The Cold War would be like this, and it was something that really influenced me a lot. And at that time also, in '86, there was the nuclear catastrophe of Chernobyl in the Ukraine. And I remember that day. It was the 80s in Germany were gray, from my understanding. There was the wall of Berlin was still up. The eastern and the western was separated. The Cold War was on the climax. As we know now, there were some nuclear missiles on the way, almost by misunderstandings. Something like this, a very dense situation. Something like two dragons locking each other, and the one wants to eat the sun and the other one the moon, and that's why they do it. This is the balance that would be on the planet at the time. So all this went somehow into these films, but as I said, subconsciously. I just on the way later found out why I would be, as a young person, unknowingly reflect on these topics, which later I understood actually quite a lot about. So when I made this film, Paradise, already won a prize at the Maler Videokunstpreis, which was at the time possibly one of the only German prizes for video. All others were film. And that sort of already put me out of my school I was in. In the school I had friends there, and we were a good team. as a class, but my liking, my preference on the computer instead of the film at the time already put me like in a outsider position always. So I was winning this prize. I was catapulted outside, and shortly after, then I got hired. I got known. I got introduced to the Institute of New Media in Frankfurt to Peter Weibel, which I showed my film, which was brand new at the time, and he looked at it and said, "You're gonna work with us here at the institute?" And I said, "Yes." What does that mean? This Städelschule Frankfurt, which is like more or less mainstream, quite elitistic art school, standard art school like painting and other media, and actually they had a filmmaker class by Kubelka, I believe was his name. They suddenly invested in high technology, and they had these computers I described before. The computers, they were so fast, called silicon graphics, that they started to create radiation. And more or less unknowing, I ended up in this environment, while my friend Ralph went completely the commercial way, founded a company, actually a large company, making a lot of money. And on the other hand, I'd be working there, and I started to be invited to all these festivals and show work or make lectures there that I otherwise couldn't have afforded to go to. So I considered myself to be very lucky, fortunate, which was partially also due to the incredible amount of work I had invested, like learning filmmaking, learning about light, measuring sound, recording sound, programming computers, learning guitar, making instruments, put it all together. That also made me very independent, because in the end I could do, if I needed to, I could do everything by myself, which is not so much fun actually. It's always more fun to work with people, but if there are no people, then you could rely on yourself and you are independent. So if you have an idea, you know all the appropriate things that you would have to do to create a result with that. So this second part, that was a story about to be in the studying video actually, and also then go much more even to computers. And at that time I created, it was 87, I created this light installation I had described called Flicker. And that was tremendously eye-opening for myself, because it had pulses and color, and it would be super abstract, but it was something new by the quality of the light that's been coming, the quality of the blue light, which I made it blue, that would slowly come to the world, because now, as you know, that all our devices have a bias, a tendency to be in the blue light spectrum. And this is quite interesting because it affects your rhythm as a human being, because blue light actually makes you awake. It's the day is coming, because the German, the circadian, I don't know actually the English word, but the 24-hour rhythm actually is actually locked to color. Like blue light makes you awake, and orange light makes you sleepy. This is actually a reflection of the way of the sun. And the first bacteria actually, without eyes even, could actually perceive the sensation of blue light. So the blue light, also in the nuclear, blue light means also someone or something is faster than the speed of light in a medium, which I will explain later. But So suddenly in 87, I think the chemical imperative of society in technology had come to an end. It had not come to end, the chemical imperative in medicine, for instance. Still today, medicine is full of chemical imperatives like pills, anti-natural, anti-herbal, anti-frequency. But technology-wise, which always is faster, it had come to an end, the chemical imperative. You know this. Yes. So the year is 1999. The promise of freedom has been broken. The promise of the endless operation of programming has been broken, because programming and coding and the virtual world is directly connected to the electric grid. The electric grid needs a lot of power. So how to express that? Yes, so, and the first thing is that the digital offers a new horizon. There is the state of matter of this world, the carbon-bound world, is not enough to express the state of matter of the digital. And already in 95, in a work called Shift, which we showed at gasometer. A gasometer is like a high tube of fossil gas that was 100 meters that was stored inside, a temple of matter, so to say, of the industrial age. Already then understood that the promise of society by electricity would come to an end, also ending the reign of the digital. So how to express that? The states of matter of this world are not enough to express the states of matter for information. So I invented for the Shift work 4 extra states of matter. They were called flicker, sync, link, and void, I believe. The last state of matter is void. And that was an artistic concept. I'm not a scientist at all, and I don't wish to be a scientist, because otherwise I couldn't formulate something like this. Why do I say that? Because now in 1999 I understood that the digital, which now enters society, the internet is becoming popular, and people start making websites, and people start to understand actually how to make money in the internet through advertising. I'm talking about Google, for example. And still there is no social platform in the internet. So it is clear that the next platforms will use the social, because that is surely missing. And also the next platforms will try to make business. So again, the pioneering spirit of the fathers and mothers never thinks about money, but that's the second wave is only thinking about that. So Tim Berners-Lee, who actually invented this new world of internet, he also didn't think as being a fathering pioneer of the internet. He didn't think about the commerce at the time. He was also surprised by it. But think about it. At the time, let's go back to the 60s. The internet is actually not an invention of the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s. It's an invention of the 60s. Again, Cold War. And humanity at the time is playing with the first digital messages. In fact, the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico is used to somehow make a marketing show, to transmit a first binary image to outer space to make a contact. This is the folkloristic narration of what's been happening there, but the real narration, for my understanding, would be that both the internet, both the Arecibo telescope are being developed by the military and the US military, and they're both used actually to make a network that could survive a nuclear war. Means if I destroy this node, it's still, the information could find other nodes to still reach its destination. So much more like a brain works. Also the Arecibo telescope, which its digital message of the binary human in the solar system with the binary DNA, etc., actually blueprints our development now, because it reduces everything to binary universe. And also the Arecibo telescope is actually a military thing, and it is the largest radar station of the Cold War. You have to say, you could track incoming nuclear missiles with it. This is the main purpose of it. So marketing things like sending a message to outer space is just to slowly give it in the hands to operate it for civil society. Same with the internet. The internet is giving to us to being operated from a military origin to society. But think about it. If I give you a weapon that's been developed to have a military purpose and do something else with it, it's still inside somehow, the spirit. So I say, whatever we do after and comes now, and now even what I say is a little bit techno-romantic or digital romantic. This is always based on this frequency also, and I never forgot that actually. So the work R111 wants to put this all together somehow, understanding that what we're dealing with will cost a lot of energy, because at the time there starts to be problems with electronic power in California. And yes, you know, Silicon Valley is in California, and nobody knows whether these digital devices, the upcoming internet, has something to do with it. And it is getting clear that interest groups are taking advantage of digital technology. It's, for one hand, earning money with advertising or selling, and the other one taking advantage of either building coal power plants or nuclear power plants at the time to power this new industry. And big companies, corporate companies that were digital now are also all of them into the power business, and they were early on, so they knew what it would actually mean. So we have it here. The end of the resources is also the end of software, the end of the singularity, the so-called point where software and the whole universe come together, and the human disintegrates into a oneness with everything around it. That's a description of the Silicon narrative of the Silicon Valley. And how would you show that? So these states of matter, now that was quite a long way for me to explain, but the states of matter, show them all. There's 4 new states of matter, show them all in one room. Like now, first thing, you have like a liquid floor where you walk over and you create waves. And the waves actually also tremble the floor. That gives you a feedback of vibration. That actually is a very religious icon, because it means that every one of us today can walk over water, a privilege that used to be the privilege of very special people in the Bible described as being the Son of God, for example. I'm just saying that it's now distributed. There is a Buddha in every little village at this time in society. And that's one state of matter where you introduce your energy into the matrix. The film Matrix is also the same, comes out at that time. It describes similar things, like the human actually puts his or her energy inside the digital apparatus, which again creates this simulation to make them feel happy enough to still operate and still be alive, right? And how to express that? Okay, first, as I said, we showed it in connected cities in the Ruhrgebiet, which is actually, the Ruhrgebiet is the coal mining area of Germany, right connected to power generation. And as it turns out, I realized that most of the places we show our work were all connected to the fossil age. We showed at the Borinage in France, that was the former coal mining area of France and Belgium. We showed in the Ruhrgebiet. We all showed a lot of times in these places, and I think that has a specific reason, because I understand we operated at the very end, the intellectual end of this area, which takes longer as an echo in society to go on. But the states of matter being represented by the installation had one main purpose. Digital information is just noise, like small noise on other information. Let me show this to you with waves. If you stand at the ocean and look at the waves, you see that the waves are multi-structured, like there's bigger waves, and on the bigger waves are a lot of small waves, like by rain or by small things. The small waves are really not important, interesting. You have to wait for the big wave. If the tsunami is going to come, the large wave, that is what you have to look out for. The other is just the daily noise, the noise of promises, the noise of advertising, the noise of commerce, the noise of the world, so to say. Watch out for the large wave. So the same with information. Digital is just a small noise, and the underlying noise is the wave it sits on is energy, and for instance atomic energy. And at the time, for me, it's clear, I hate nuclear energy, because I felt it. I got actually radiated by a nuclear reactor. I know how it feels, how your body feels after doing this. But I understand that the way we never give up, we never go back, we don't practice Zen, like it's enough what we have. We don't reduce ourselves. This will make the world a nuclear place in the end. This has to. And this I wanted to express also with R11, because R, the letter R, is the old value, the old unit for radiation. So R111 also means a radiation level of 111 Röntgen, R for Röntgen, in Tokyo, actually in the year 2001. This is a wild fantasy I have at the time, but also it is clear that people pick up on the idea that digital is not the end, it's just a noisy frequency of something more important coming, a lower frequency. And we show this work, which is visually and by its aggregates completely stunning in inviting people. And if they wish, they can dig in intellectually much deeper. It's a very, for us as a group, we were called by the time then Supreme Particles, and we were, I think, 15 people then at the time going to Tokyo, or maybe 10, I don't actually remember. It was successful. For me, it was the end of it. I thought you cannot do any better than that with this media. And also for our host, which was actually the company of Canon Art Lab, curated by Yukiko, that was a large success for them. And it was the last work they ever did. And so for me, that was the end of the interactive and the digital work, because I know now that it's more important to investigate where power comes from, which information actually power is writing on the planet. How does power operate by electrons? What is digital besides information, or is information the unknown state of matter by itself? So the work R11, with all its aggregates, showing the circle, not the circle of life, but the circle of matter, actually. While everybody else at that time tries to virtualize reality, we tried the opposite, to physicalize virtual reality. Means to show that there is no separation between the virtual and the physical, but for every bit you write on your computer, there's actually a caterpillar digging into the planet or into the earth at another point. So a lot of other questions come up. How is energy produced? What is the frequency of energy? Is there frequency in energy? Yes, 50 hertz, 60 hertz. You see, suddenly you realize energy by itself is a medium, and you can operate it just as you could on another level you operated before with all this media. So energy is, of course, a media. And because I believe the fossil age is ended, I say that the new that's going to come is the infossil, the connection between energy and information. Info or fossil, infossil, also meaning live forever or eternal. That is now the new thing. So R111 was the personal climax in interactive art, but it was much more than interactive art, because it was also my personal, or as a group, also the last work of the group, which has maybe operated 10 works in the total. And I knew that whatever would come next would take a lot of courage, actually, because you couldn't just involve yourself with this very absent digital work. Being at home, you'd actually have to experience, you have to go to the origin of energy. And the origin of energy is not in the computer. It's still in this world.